Poor twins entered a young CEO's company and asked, "Where can I buy a dad?" Upon hearing this, he started to cry. Wesley Davis parked his black Audi in the CEO's reserved spot. The Quantum Enterprises building cast a long shadow on the sidewalk, its mirrored windows reflecting the clear spring sky. Wesley adjusted his navy blue tie, grabbed his leather briefcase from the passenger seat, and exited the car, setting the alarm with a discreet beep. At 35, Wesley had built a tech empire from the ground up. Quantum was his creation, his legacy, the result of years of tireless work and precise decisions. As CEO of one of the country's most innovative, sustainable energy companies, his days were filled with meetings, contracts, and strategies that defined the future for thousands of employees. "Good morning, Mr. Davis," the security guard greeted at the entrance. "Good morning, Mike," Wesley replied with a brief nod. The routine was always the same: pass through security, check urgent messages in the elevator, and reach his 30th floor office with enough time to review reports before the first meeting. Today, however, a video conference with Asian investors was starting in 20 minutes, and he still needed to finalize the numbers from the latest acquisition. Approaching the main entrance, Wesley put his phone into his jacket's inner pocket, ready to start another productive day. His serious, focused expression rarely changed during working hours, the CEO mode, as his assistant used to joke. That's when something completely out of the ordinary happened. Two small girls appeared in front of him, blocking his path to the revolving door. They were practically identical, with curly brown hair and floral dresses, one with a yellow bow and the other with a blue bow in her hair. Twins, no doubt, and they couldn't have been more than 4 years old. "Mister, where can I buy a dad?" asked the girl with the yellow bow, looking directly at Wesley with intense green eyes. The question hit Wesley like a physical blow. He froze mid-stride, feeling the air escape his lungs. Those simple words, spoken with the brutal innocence only children possess, instantly tore down the walls he had built around his most painful memories. His eyes welled up with tears before he could control them. One streamed down his face, and he quickly wiped it away, but not in time to hide it from the girl in front of him, who watched him with curiosity. "Are you crying?" she asked, tilting her head. Wesley felt transported back 30 years, himself at 5 years old, sitting on the front steps of his house, waiting for a father who would never return. The image of his mother trying to explain that Daddy decided to live somewhere else, while fighting back her own tears. The nights he heard her softly crying in the next room, birthdays without a card, Christmases with only 2 places at the table, school presentations where he looked for a face in the audience that was never there. Taking a deep breath, Wesley regained some of his composure. He looked around, realizing the girls were completely alone. There was no adult nearby who seemed responsible for them. "Are you alone?" he asked, avoiding the question about his tears. "Where's your mum?" The girl with the blue bow, who had been silent until then, took a small step forward. "Mommy's working," she replied, her voice softer than her sister's. "And where does she work?" Wesley asked, crouching down a little to be closer to their height. "At the diner," said the girl with the yellow bow. "The blue diner, past the big corner. It's not too far." "Did you come all the way here by yourselves?" Wesley couldn't hide his concern. "We just wanted to see the shiny building," explained the girl with the blue bow, as if that justified everything. "Mommy was busy serving coffee to people." Wesley checked his watch. The video conference would start in 15 minutes. The correct procedure would be to call security, ask them to locate the girl's mother, and proceed to his meeting. That's what he would normally do, but nothing that morning felt normal. That child's question, "Mister, where can I buy a dad?" had touched a wound he thought had healed long ago. A vulnerability he kept carefully hidden under layers of professional success and a schedule too busy to allow for personal reflection. "What are your names?" he asked, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to discreetly wipe his eyes. "I'm Janie," replied the girl with the yellow bow, the one who had asked about a dad. "And she's Tessa," she pointed to her sister. "We're twins, Janie and Tessa," Wesley repeated. "My name is Wesley. I think we should take you back to your mom. She must be very worried." "We didn't tell her we were leaving," Tessa confessed, looking slightly regretful. We just said we were going to sit at the table by the window. Wesley pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to his assistant. Personal emergency. Start the video conference without me. I'll call as soon as possible. Come on, he said to the girls. Can you show me the way to this diner? Without hesitation, Janie took his right hand. Tessa hesitated for a second, but then quickly took his left hand. Wesley felt something strange, a comforting warmth holding those tiny hands. It had been so long since he felt such innocent contact, so devoid of ulterior motives or professional expectations. They walked along the bustling sidewalk, a peculiar contrast. The executive in his impeccable $3,000 suit, flanked by two girls in colorful floral dresses. Some people looked on, curious or smiling, but continued on their way. Why did you cry when I asked about buying a dad? Janie insisted as they walked. Wesley thought for a moment before answering. Because, I also grew up without a dad, he replied, surprising himself with his own honesty. What happened to him? Tessa asked. He left when I was little, Wesley simply replied. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. We never had a dad, Janie said with the frankness of children. Mommy says he left even before we were born. She gets sad when we ask about him, Tessa added. That's why we don't ask anymore. Wesley felt a pang in his chest. These girls had never even met their father. They never had the chance to create even a single memory, good or bad. At least he had some memories from his early years, even if the abandonment had stained them all. That's why I wanted to know where to buy one, Janie explained, as if it were the most logical solution in the world. So Mommy wouldn't be sad anymore. Wesley felt his throat tighten again. The innocence and simple logic of that child disarmed him completely. Now you know, Janie, he said gently. You can't buy a dad. It's not like buying a toy or a book. Why not? She asked, frowning. We buy food, we buy clothes. Because dads are people, Wesley explained, searching for simple words. And people can't be bought. They choose to be in our lives. But then how do we get one? Tessa asked, sounding genuinely confused. Wesley took a deep breath, caught off guard by the depth of the conversation he was having with two 4-year-olds. Sometimes, he said, a special person comes into a family's life and decides they want to be a dad to children who don't have one. But that's not something we can buy or force. It's something that happens when it's meant to happen. It's there, Janie suddenly exclaimed, pointing ahead and interrupting the conversation. The Blue Diner. They turned the corner and Wesley saw the establishment, Blue Morning Cafe. A modest but well-maintained blue and white facade with a few sidewalk tables partially occupied by morning customers. His heart quickened for no apparent reason. A strange sense of anticipation came over him, as if he was about to turn an important page in his life. As they approached, Wesley could see the activity inside through the window. Customers at the counter, waitresses serving tables. The place looked clean and cozy, with an air of well-kept simplicity. Janie let go of his hand and ran inside, with Tessa close behind. Wesley followed them, entering the diner filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and freshly baked bread. Mommy, Janie called out loudly. A woman who was waiting on a table quickly turned at the sound of the voice. She wore a blue uniform with a white apron, her curly brown hair tied back in a messy bun. Girls, she exclaimed, her expression quickly changing from surprise to relief and then to worry. Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere. She hurried towards her daughters, crouching down to hug them. Wesley remained standing, watching the scene, suddenly feeling like an intruder. We went to see the shiny building, Mommy, Janie explained, pointing behind her. And we asked the man where we could buy a dad. The woman visibly paled, pressing her lips together. She looked up in the direction Janie was pointing, ready to apologize to the stranger her daughters had bothered. I'm so sorry about the girls. Question they didn't, she began, but the words died on her lips as her eyes met Wesley's. The shock on her face was evident. Her eyes widened, her lips parted in complete surprise. For a moment, she stood completely still, as if she had seen a ghost. Wesley, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the diner's hum. Hello, Marissa, he replied, feeling as if time had stopped. Marissa Walker, his first love, the girl he shared dreams and promises with during his senior year of high school, the person he left behind 10 years ago when he left to study abroad on a scholarship that would change his life forever. The reunion was silent, loaded with unspoken memories. Marissa maintained her composure, but the look between them revealed that something strong still existed, even if buried by years of silence and diverging paths. You know this man, Mommy?" Tessa asked, looking between the two adults with curiosity. Marissa seemed to wake from a trance. She blinked several times and forced a smile. "Yes, sweetie," she replied, her voice slightly hoarse. "We met a long time ago." A co-worker approached Marissa. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking at Wesley with interest. "Table 6 is waiting for their order, and more customers just arrived." "Yes, I'll be right there," Marissa replied quickly. She turned back to Wesley with a polite smile, but her eyes still showed the shock of the reunion. "Thank you for bringing my daughters back safely. I need to get back to work now." "Of course," he replied, feeling there was much more to be said, but knowing that this was neither the time nor the place. Marissa guided the girls to a table in the corner, saying something quietly to them, probably instructions to keep quiet. Then she quickly returned to work, moving efficiently between tables, serving customers with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Wesley noticed how she looked different and, at the same time, incredibly familiar. The same green eyes her daughters had inherited, the same way she tilted her head when taking an order, the same way she tucked a stubborn strand of hair behind her ear. But there was something new, too, a seriousness, a subtle weariness in the lines around her eyes, a determination in her movements that spoke of years of struggle. Wesley should leave. He had an important video conference, a company to run, a day full of appointments, but his feet seemed glued to the floor, unable to move towards the door. Janie waved at him from the corner table, smiling as if they had shared a secret. Tessa watched him with curious eyes, more reserved but equally intense, the same green eyes as Marissa. Finally, Wesley managed to turn and walk to the door. Before leaving, he looked back one more time. Marissa was at the counter, writing down an order. As if feeling his gaze, she briefly looked up, meeting his eyes across the space filled with customers and tables. For an instant, it was as if 10 years hadn't passed. As if they were still those young people full of dreams and promises, before life took them on such different paths, before each of their choices created the chasm that now seemed impossible to cross. Then the moment passed, and Marissa turned her attention back to the customer in front of her, professionalism returning to her face like a necessary mask. Wesley stepped out onto the sunny sidewalk, feeling as if he had woken from a long, confusing dream. Janie's question continued to echo in his mind, along with the image of Marissa's eyes when she saw him again. "Mister, where can I buy a dad?" There was something in that phrase that resonated with an old pain in his chest, a pain he shared with those girls who never knew their father, a pain that clearly Marissa also carried in her own way, raising 2 children alone while working in a modest diner. The contrast with his own life couldn't be starker. He, the successful CEO with his designer suit and imported car, reviewing multi-million-dollar contracts. She, a single mother, serving coffee in a white apron, counting every penny to support 2 daughters. 2 lives that were once intertwined, now as distant as they could be. And yet, a casual encounter with 2 little girls had created an unexpected bridge between these worlds. Wesley looked at his watch. The video conference had already started without him. He should call his assistant, ask her to reschedule, go back to the office. Instead, he picked up his phone and typed another message. "Cannot attend meeting today. Urgent personal situation. Reschedule my agenda for the rest of the day." He couldn't explain why he did it. He didn't know what he intended to do in the next few hours. He just knew he couldn't concentrate on mergers and acquisitions when his mind was filled with questions about Marissa and her daughters. He needed to understand who these girls were who never knew their father, who they were to Marissa, and, perhaps, who they could become to him. With slow steps, Wesley walked down the sunny sidewalk away from his corporate building, knowing only that nothing would be the same. 3 days had passed since the unexpected reunion at the diner. Wesley couldn't get the image of Marissa in her blue uniform, efficiently and dignifiedly serving tables, out of his head. Nor could he forget Janie and Tessa's green eyes, so much like their mothers, looking at him with that innocent curiosity as they asked the question that still echoed in his mind, "Mister, where can I buy a dad?" Sitting in his 30th floor office, with a panoramic view of the city, Wesley seemed distant during meetings. His assistant asked if he was sick. He assured her he wasn't, but he knew something had changed within him since that morning. Finally, late on a Tuesday afternoon, Wesley made a decision. He left work early, something almost unheard of for him, and drove to the Blue Morning Cafe. He chose the time carefully, close to closing out, when there would be fewer customers and, perhaps, Marissa would have a few minutes to talk. The chime of the door announced his entry. Only 2 tables were occupied, an elderly lady sipping tea by the window, and a young man engrossed in his laptop in the corner. Marissa was behind the counter, counting the till. When she looked up and saw him, her expression blended surprise with a certain resignation, as if she knew he would return sooner or later. "Hello, Marissa," Wesley said, approaching the counter. "Wesley," she replied with a brief nod. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I needed to come back," he said simply. "Do you have a few minutes?" Marissa looked at the wall clock. "We close in half an hour. If you don't mind waiting until I finish." "Of course, no problem." Wesley sat at a table near the counter. He ordered a coffee when a waitress approached, just to have something to do while he waited. He watched Marissa working, her efficient movements, the way she interacted with customers, polite, but with a reserve that hadn't existed in the Marissa he had known so many years ago. Slowly, the cafe emptied. The elderly lady left. The young man with the laptop closed his computer and departed. Lights in part of the dining area were turned off. The waitress said goodbye, and finally it was just the 2 of them. Marissa took off her apron, put it under the counter, and walked to the table where Wesley was sitting. There was tension in her shoulders, as if she was preparing for a difficult conversation. "The girls are with a neighbor," she said, sitting down. "I have to pick them up in an hour." "Thank you for giving me this time," Wesley replied. "I know you must be tired after a full day's work." An uncomfortable silence hung between them. 10 years is a long time to be filled with casual words. "They're beautiful," Wesley said finally. "Your daughters. They look a lot like you." Marissa smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he'd seen since he came in. "Yes, thank goodness they take after me more than their father." The mention of the girl's father hung in the air like an unasked question. Wesley hesitated, then decided to be direct. "Marissa, I don't mean to pry, but who is their father?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering strength for a story she didn't like to tell. "Nobody you know," she replied, looking at the empty cup in front of her. "It happened after you left, about 2 years later." Wesley waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "After you left for college, I tried to move on," she continued. "So I took some community college courses, worked different jobs. I met David at a bar where I was bartending. He seemed stable, attentive. We had plans." Marissa paused, her fingers nervously fiddling with a napkin. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified but also hopeful. I thought we'd form a family." A bitter smile crossed her lips. "I told him at a dinner I specially prepared. I even bought a pair of baby booties to give him as a gift." Wesley felt a knot in his throat, anticipating the direction of the story. "He said he needed time to think," Marissa continued. "The next day I couldn't reach him, nor the day after, nor the following week. He just disappeared. Blocked my number, moved out of the apartment he was renting, deleted all social media. I found out later he went back to California, where he used to live." "Marissa, I'm so sorry," Wesley said, genuinely moved. "That's when I found out they were twins," she went on, her voice now firmer. "At the 4-month ultrasound. 2 girls. I thought about all the options, Wesley, all of them, but in the end I decided to go through with the pregnancy. Alone." Her eyes finally met his, defiant. I never regretted it. Not for a second. Janie and Tessa are the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm sure they are, Wesley agreed. They're extraordinary. When they were born, my parents helped a bit, but soon after, my father got sick. Alzheimer's. My mother had to dedicate herself full-time to him. She still takes care of him at home, in the countryside. Marissa shrugged. So, it's really just been me and the girls ever since. You didn't try to locate their father? For child support in your... I tried, Marissa interrupted. During the pregnancy and after they were born. I even hired a lawyer who agreed to be paid in installments. We managed to find him, but he contested paternity, demanded a DNA test. When the result confirmed it, he claimed unemployment, financial problems. She shook her head. In the end, the child support amount the judge ordered was so small it barely covered one of their daycare fees, and even then he was constantly late. And now, Marissa gave a dry laugh. 2 years ago, he completely stopped paying. I heard he moved abroad. I could go after him again, but honestly, Wesley, it's not worth the hassle. I'd rather focus my energy on the girls. Wesley watched Marissa's face as she spoke. The years had left small lines around her eyes, a certain weariness in her posture, but also a strength he deeply admired. The girls never met him, Marissa added. He saw the birth photos I sent, but he never showed up. Not at the hospital, not afterward. Janie and Tessa don't know what he looks like. They've never heard his voice. That's why Janie asked me where she could buy a dad, Wesley concluded, the pieces falling into place. Marissa nodded, a glimmer of unshed tears in her eyes. They started to notice, at daycare, seeing other kids being picked up by their dads. On TV, in books. They asked more and more about it. I try to explain it the best way I can, but... She sighed. How do you explain abandonment to 4-year-olds? Wesley reached out his hand across the table, almost touching hers, but stopping at the last moment. You've done an incredible job with them, Marissa. They're well-behaved, intelligent, full of personality. I do what I can, she replied, looking at her watch. I need to pick up the girls now. Can I walk with you? The question came out before Wesley could think. Marissa hesitated, surprised. It's not necessary, Wesley. Our conversation ends here. You already know what you wanted to know. Please, he insisted. I'd like to see the girls again. I promise not to take up too much of your time. Something in his tone must have convinced Marissa, who finally agreed with a reluctant nod. They left the cafe together after Marissa locked up and set the alarm. They walked side by side, Wesley adjusting his long strides to her slower pace. They turned onto a side street, then another, gradually moving away from the commercial area towards a more modest residential neighborhood. They stopped in front of an old 3-story building without an elevator. Marissa pressed the intercom for apartment 102. It's me, Mrs. Patel. I'm here to pick up the girls. Seconds later, the door opened and an elderly Indian lady smiled at them. They behaved very well today, Mrs. Patel said. We baked cookies together. The twins appeared behind her, their faces lighting up at the sight of their mother. Then they noticed Wesley. Look, Tessa. Hey, it's the man from the big building, Janie exclaimed, running to the door. You came back. Tessa seemed equally excited, though more subdued than her sister. Hello, girls, Wesley greeted, smiling. After thanking Mrs. Patel, Marissa guided everyone upstairs to her apartment. Wesley noticed her hesitate briefly before opening the door, as if she was hesitant to show her home. It's not very big, she said in a low voice, and I haven't had time to tidy up after breakfast yet. The apartment was indeed small, a living room combined with a kitchenette, a short hallway that likely led to the bedrooms and bathroom. The space was clean and organized, but Wesley immediately noticed the signs of scarcity that Marissa tried to hide. The sofa had careful patches on one of the arms. The kitchen table was simple, with mismatched chairs. The walls had drawings by the girls, framed with colorful cardboard. A creative and inexpensive form of decoration. Mister, want to see our books? Janie asked, pulling Wesley's hand towards a small bookshelf. Janie, let Mr. Wesley breathe, Marissa gently chided. Why don't you two go wash your hands? You have cookie flour all over yourselves. The girls obeyed, running to the bathroom. When they were alone, Marissa seemed even more uncomfortable. Would you like some coffee? Or tea? That's all I have to offer, I'm afraid. No need for anything, thank you, Wesley replied. His eyes caught a detail on the kitchen table, a small stack of envelopes. He recognized the shape and colors, utility bills, rent. Marissa followed his gaze and quickly gathered the envelopes, putting them in a drawer. Sorry for the mess, she mumbled. There's no mess at all, he replied. Your apartment is cozy. Wesley observed the small refrigerator, the kitchen cabinet with one of its doors slightly askew. He noticed the absence of electronic devices beyond an old TV. The girls returned from the bathroom, eager to show Wesley their few toys, and he sat on the living room floor to get a better look. While the twins chattered, Wesley noticed Marissa discreetly opening the kitchen cabinet. It was almost empty. A few packages of pasta, rice, 2 cans of tuna, a half-empty cereal box. After a few minutes, when the girls went to put away their toys, Wesley approached Marissa in the kitchen. Are you doing okay? He asked quietly. I mean, financially? Marissa's face immediately hardened. We're managing, she replied, her voice tense. I don't need your concern, Wesley. I didn't mean to offend. I just want to help, if I can. I don't need charity, she replied, even more rigidly. Wesley noticed another envelope on the table, partially hidden under a dish towel. A disconnection notice for electricity, with the warning "Final Notice" in red. Marissa followed his gaze again and sighed, her resistance waning slightly. Sometimes I have to choose, she finally admitted, her voice so low he could barely hear it. I let the electricity bill go overdue when I have to choose between that and food. The confession, so simple and direct, hit Wesley like a punch to the gut. The reality of that family of 3 was so far removed from his own life of luxuries and comforts. Marissa, I don't need your pity, Wesley, she interrupted. We're getting by. We always have. Before he could respond, the girls came running back, asking to watch cartoons before dinner. Marissa checked the clock and nodded. Only half an hour, while I prepare something for us to eat. Wesley realized it was time to leave. He had imposed his presence long enough. I need to go, he said, picking up his jacket. Thank you for talking to me, for letting me see the girls. Marissa walked him to the door, while Janie and Tessa protested, wanting him to stay longer. Another day, maybe, he promised the girls, who waved sadly. In the building hallway, out of earshot of the children, Wesley turned to Marissa. If you need anything, we don't, she cut him off. But thank you. He nodded, respecting her pride. You're incredible, you know, he said sincerely. What you've done, raising these girls alone, the strength it takes, it's admirable. For a moment, Marissa's mask dropped, and he glimpsed the vulnerability behind the strength. Good night, Wesley, she simply said, closing the door. Wesley walked down the stairs slowly, his mind processing everything he had seen and heard. The small apartment, the overdue bills, the empty cupboard, Marissa's silent strength, raising 2 daughters alone, without support, choosing between paying for electricity or buying food. As he reached his luxurious car, parked on the street, Wesley felt a determination grow within him. It wasn't pity he felt. It was admiration, respect, and a deep impulse to do something, anything, to help that family. Driving back to his penthouse apartment, Wesley was already formulating a plan. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would do something concrete, however small, something to bring a little joy to those children who asked where they could buy a father. The morning after delivering the dolls, Wesley woke with a strange feeling, a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The image of the girls hugging him in gratitude remained vivid in his mind, like a continuously replaying film. During the 9 a.m. executive meeting, his assistant had to call him twice before he realized he was being addressed. Is everything all right, Mr. Davis? She asked, concerned. Yes, just thinking about something else, he replied, turning his attention back to the graphs projected on the screen. But his thoughts kept returning to that small apartment, to those girls and their single mother who faced so many difficulties with quiet dignity. By the end of the day, Wesley made a decision. He stopped by a delicatessen on the way and bought ingredients for a simple but substantial dinner, something he could bring to Marissa and the girls without it looking like charity. Fresh pasta, homemade sauce, artisan bread, some fruits. Real food, not just donation boxes. When he arrived at Marissa's building, he felt a momentary hesitation. Was he intruding too much? Maybe he should have called first if he had her number. Taking a deep breath, he climbed the stairs and knocked on the door of apartment 203. It was Tessa who opened, her green eyes widening when she saw him. "Mommy," she called, not taking her eyes off Wesley. "It's Wesley." Marissa appeared behind her daughter, drying her hands on a dish towel, clearly surprised. "Wesley, what are you doing here?" "I brought dinner," he said, holding up the bags. "So I hope I'm not bothering you." Before Marissa could answer, Janie came running down the hallway. "Wesley," she exclaimed, hugging his legs without ceremony. "You came back. Come see, we made something for you." Marissa seemed torn between gratitude and discomfort, but eventually stepped aside. "Come in, please," she said, taking one of the bags. "How you didn't need to bring anything." The apartment seemed brighter today, with a few candles lit on the small coffee table. Wesley noticed that the space was even more organized, as if Marissa had made an effort to make everything impeccable after his previous visit. "Well, the girls haven't stopped talking about the dolls," Marissa commented quietly, while Wesley placed the groceries on the small kitchen counter. "They slept hugging them." Wesley smiled, feeling that same lightness from the morning. "I'm glad they liked them." "Wesley, Wesley," Janie called, pulling him by the hand towards the small sofa. "We made something special at school today. Tessa, get the drawing." Tessa, always more methodical than her sister, went to a small table in the corner and picked up a large sheet of paper, which she carefully kept face down against her chest. "It's a surprise," she explained seriously. The two girls stood side by side, as if about to give a formal presentation. Wesley couldn't help but smile at their seriousness. "Ready?" Janie asked. "Ready," Wesley replied, sitting on the sofa to be at their height. With a dramatic flourish, Tessa turned the paper, revealing a colorful drawing made with markers and crayons. Wesley felt his heart stop for a moment. In the drawing, 3 stick figures stood holding hands in front of what appeared to be a building, likely Quantum Enterprises. The 2 smaller figures wore triangular dresses, one yellow and one blue. The tallest figure in the middle wore what looked like a dark blue suit. All had huge smiles drawn on their round faces. At the top of the sheet, written in large, irregular letters in various colors, was the phrase, "Our new friend." "It's you," Janie explained, pointing to the tall figure in the middle. "And this is me, and this is Tessa. We made it at the diner today," Tessa continued, "while Mommy was working. Mrs. Rita gave us paper and markers." Wesley felt something break inside him, a barrier he didn't even know existed. He reached out his hands to take the drawing, which Tessa carefully handed to him. You made this for me?" he asked, his voice hoarser than he intended. "Yes," Janie replied, shaking her head vigorously. "You're our new friend. You gave us the most beautiful dolls in the world." "And you're kind," Tessa added, more reserved, but with equal sincerity. "You don't yell and you don't get mad." Wesley looked at the drawing, those simple stick figures holding hands, and felt a lump in his throat. For years, he had built his life around numbers, contracts, acquisitions, professional successes. At no point had anyone done something so genuinely sincere for him. "Our new friend," 3 simple words written by tiny hands, but they seemed to weigh more than all the business awards he had ever received. "Don't you like it?" Tessa asked, worried by his silence. "No, sweetie," he replied, finding his voice. "I love it. It's the best gift I've ever received." Standing at the entrance to the small kitchen, Marissa watched the scene with an expression Wesley couldn't quite decipher. There was surprise there, perhaps a touch of concern, but also something softer, more open. "Can we stick it on your fridge at your house?" Janie asked, hopping with excitement. "No, silly," Tessa corrected. "At his house, it should be in his office, like Mrs. Martinez's at school." Wesley held the drawing with reverence, as if it were a precious document. "I'll put it where I can see it every day," he promised. He looked up and met Marissa's eyes. For a brief moment, something silent passed between them, a mutual understanding. She clearly saw how that simple, innocent gesture had deeply touched him. "Girls, why don't you wash your hands for dinner?" Marissa suggested softly. Wesley brought food. The twins ran off towards the bathroom, eagerly debating who would wash their hands first. In the brief moment of privacy, Marissa approached Wesley, who still held the drawing, looking at it as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "They've never done that before," she said in a low voice. "They've never become attached to any man, not even my father, whom they rarely see. Not even the regular customers at the diner who've known them since they were babies." Wesley nodded, unable to form adequate words. "I know this means nothing to you," Marissa continued. "You have an important life, a company to run. But for them, it means everything to me," Wesley interrupted, finally finding his voice. "Don't you understand? This," he held up the drawing, "is more valuable than any contract I've ever signed." Marissa studied him for a moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Whatever she saw in his eyes seemed to convince her, as she nodded slightly. "I'll warm up dinner," she said, turning to the kitchen. The evening unfolded with a simplicity Wesley hadn't experienced in years. They ate at the small table, the girls talking endlessly about their day at the diner, how they helped Mrs. Rita fold napkins, about the dolls, about everything and nothing. Wesley listened attentively, asking questions, genuinely interested in their small worlds. When it was time to leave, Janie and Tessa protested. "Stay longer," Janie begged. "Faye, we can show you how the dolls look in the little corner Mommy made for us at the diner," Tessa suggested. "Another day," Wesley promised, bending down to say goodbye. "I need to go now, but I'll come back to visit you." "Promise?" Tessa asked, her green eyes serious. "I promise," he replied, and realized he would never break that promise. At the door, as the girls waved from the hallway, Marissa gently touched his arm. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for, I don't know, for all of this." Wesley nodded, the drawing carefully folded in his jacket's inner pocket, close to his heart. "I'm the one who should thank you," he replied, "for letting me be a part of their lives, even for brief moments." As he walked down the stairs, Wesley felt as if he was walking lighter. Something had changed in him. The words written in childlike script echoed in his mind, along with the girls' voices, their laughter, their pure and simple acceptance. Our new friend. For the first time in years, Wesley Davis wasn't just a CEO, a businessman, a figure of power and influence. He was something much simpler and, in some ways, much more significant. He was a friend. The following weeks established a pattern that no one formally planned, but that emerged naturally, like water finding its way through stones. Wesley began showing up at Marissa's apartment at regular times, usually late afternoon after work or on weekends. His first visit after the impromptu dinner started with a casual observation while washing his hands in the small bathroom. "Your faucet is dripping," he commented, returning to the living room where Marissa was organizing some clothes she had just ironed. "I know," she replied with a sigh. "It's been like that for months. The building manager said he'd fix it, but he never shows up." Wesley looked at his watch. "I have some tools in my car. If you don't mind, I can take a look." Marissa seemed surprised. "You know how to fix faucets?" A shy smile appeared on his face. "I grew up with a single mom who couldn't afford plumbers. I learned to do a lot of things myself." 20 minutes later, with his sleeves rolled up and a few water splashes on his shirt that probably cost more than Marissa's entire wardrobe, Wesley emerged victorious from the bathroom. "Done, no more dripping." It was the first of many small repairs. The following week, he noticed the kitchen cabinet hinge was loose. The next Saturday, he realized the living room outlet had a loose connection. Soon after, he was replacing the worn-out gasket on the refrigerator that was consuming too much energy. It wasn't just repairs. Wesley started bringing things, never ostentatiously, always as if they were extras, leftovers, opportunities that came up. "I stopped by the farmer's market on the way. The fruit was a great price today," he'd say, placing bags of apples, bananas, and strawberries on the kitchen table. Or else, "My assistant ordered too much food for the executive lunch. I thought maybe you guys would want to try this lasagna from the Italian trattoria." The girls quickly got used to his presence. Gradually, Wesley became part of their routine. He would arrive, and they would run to show him a new drawing or tell him about something that had happened at the diner. "Wesley, Mommy's work sink is dripping too," Janie said one afternoon. Can you fix it like you did here?" "If your mom and the cafe owner allow it, of course," he replied, smiling at the girl. The following weekend, there was Wesley on his knees under the Blue Morning Cafe as kitchen sink, fixing the faucet while Mr. Parker, the owner, watched impressed. "You have a knack for this, son," the older man commented. "If you ever get tired of the corporate life, you can always change careers." Wesley just smiled, feeling a peculiar satisfaction finishing the job, a different feeling from closing big deals. Visits to the diner also became regular. Wesley would stop by for a quick coffee almost every day. The staff already knew him by name, and the girls would always run to greet him when they spotted him at the door. "They have a radar for you," commented Rita, the oldest waitress, as she served Wesley's coffee. "They could be distracted in the back, but the second you walk in, they know." Wesley smiled, watching Janie and Tessa, who were coloring in the corner set up for them at the back of the diner. "They're special." "And so are you, apparently," Rita replied with a warm smile. "I've never seen Marissa so light." It was true. There was a subtle change in Marissa. Not that she had transformed completely, she was still the strong, independent woman with a certain protective reserve. But there were small signs. She smiled more easily. Her face seemed less tense. The lines of worry on her forehead had softened. One Tuesday, Wesley left work early and drove to a utility company. He didn't tell anyone, not even Marissa. He simply approached the counter and asked to see the pending bills at her address. The employee looked at him suspiciously. "Are you a family friend?" he simply replied. The woman hesitated, but something in the seriousness of the man in front of her convinced her. "There are several overdue bills. The last disconnection notice has already been issued." "What's the total?" When the employee mentioned the amount, Wesley showed no reaction. He simply took out his credit card and settled all outstanding payments, even prepaying for the next 3 months. He did the same at the gas company and the condo association. At no point did he mention to Marissa what he had done. 3 days later, while they were having dinner in the small apartment, Marissa looked at him with an indecipherable expression. "Something strange happened today," she commented, pouring more juice for the girls. "I got a call from the electric company confirming all outstanding balances were paid. They said there must be a mistake, since—" She lowered her voice so the girls wouldn't hear. "Since I know exactly which bills are overdue." Wesley continued eating as if he hadn't heard anything out of the ordinary. The customer service representative insisted everything is in order. Not only were the overdue bills paid, but the next few months too. She stared directly at him. The same thing happened with the gas and the condo fees. Wesley finally looked up from his plate, meeting Marissa's questioning gaze. "What a coincidence," he simply said. "Wesley." "The sauce is delicious," he interrupted, deliberately changing the subject. "You're an excellent cook, Marissa." She didn't insist. Later, when the girls ran to show Wesley a new drawing, Marissa watched him from afar, her eyes reflecting a complex mixture of gratitude, relief, and something deeper, harder to name. The following week, when Wesley arrived for his usual visit, he noticed something different in the apartment. There was a new lamp in the living room, simple but beautiful. A colorful rug replaced the old, worn one, and on the kitchen table, a small vase with fresh flowers. "We got our advance 13th salary at the diner," Marissa explained, noticing his gaze. "I thought I'd make the place a bit more cozy." Wesley smiled, understanding the unspoken message. She knew exactly what he had done, but instead of confronting him or refusing his help, she found a way to preserve her dignity. It was her way of saying she accepted the support without feeling diminished by it. The small gestures continued from both sides. Wesley would arrive with groceries, they were on sale, or fix something broken. Marissa would prepare his favorite dish, or save the last piece of the pie he had praised. Without realizing it, Wesley rearranged his life around that small family. He canceled a business trip to Chicago so he wouldn't miss the elementary school festival where the girls would perform. He postponed important meetings to take Tessa to the doctor when she caught a bad flu. He started keeping a stock of healthy snacks in his office for when the girls visited him at the company. His personal assistant, Thomas, raised an eyebrow upon finding apple juice boxes and animal-shaped cookie packets in his boss's drawer. "Any new corporate food guidelines I missed, Mr. Davis?" he asked with gentle irony. Wesley smiled, something that had become more frequent in recent months. "They're for some special visitors." Thomas, who had worked with Wesley for years, noticed the change in his boss. The always proper and discreet man now had photos of two smiling girls on his office desk. Sometimes he would catch him gazing out the window with a distracted smile. And, more surprisingly, he had even seen him cancel an important video conference to rush out after receiving a call. "You seem different," Thomas commented one day while organizing the schedule. "Different how?" "More present, less on autopilot." Wesley reflected on those words after Thomas left. It was true. For the first time in years, he felt truly present in his own life, not just existing, fulfilling obligations, accumulating professional achievements, but living, feeling, participating. On a particularly cold autumn night, after a quiet dinner, the girls fell asleep watching an animated movie. Janie was sprawled on a blanket on the floor, while Tessa slept with her head on Wesley's lap, who dared not move for fear of waking her. Marissa returned from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, handing one to Wesley. She sat beside him on the small sofa, watching her sleeping daughters. "They look like angels when they sleep," she commented quietly. "Hard to believe they're the same ones who were running and screaming an hour ago." Wesley smiled, gently stroking Tessa's hair. "Loud angels," he agreed. They sat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the peace of the moment. The soft lamplight cast dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind rattled the windows and the distant sound of rain beginning to fall completed the cozy atmosphere inside the apartment. "Do you know what I like most about you, Wesley?" Marissa asked suddenly, breaking the silence. He looked at her, surprised by the unexpected question. "What? You're not trying to impress. Most men I've met try to impress me with something. Money, cars, looks, promises." She paused, watching the steam rise from her cup. "You're just trying to take care, with respect and presence." Wesley felt a warmth spread through his chest. That was exactly what he was doing, although he had never articulated it that way even to himself. "It's easy to take care of you all," he replied simply. Marissa lowered her eyes, a shadow passing over her face. "I learned not to expect anyone anymore," she said in a voice so low Wesley almost didn't hear it. "Those who promise, leave." There was a raw vulnerability in those words, a pain Marissa rarely allowed others to see. Wesley understood the weight of the trust she was placing in him by sharing that feeling. Carefully, so as not to disturb Tessa, he reached out and took Marissa's hand. "I didn't come to promise," he said, looking her in the eyes. "I came to stay." She looked away, trying to hold back the tears that began to form. For a long moment, she remained silent, just holding his hand as if it were an anchor in a turbulent sea. "The girls have grown very attached to you," she finally said, her voice betraying suppressed emotion. Wesley looked at Tessa asleep on his lap, at Janie on the floor hugging the doll he had given her. Then he looked back at Marissa, realizing that something important was being said between the lines. It wasn't just the girls she feared would be hurt if he left. "Me too," he replied softly. "I've grown more attached to you all than I ever thought possible." The silence that followed had a different weight, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Marissa didn't respond with words. She simply intertwined her fingers with his and let her head rest lightly on Wesley's shoulder. They remained like that for a long time, just existing together in that moment of shared vulnerability. Outside, the rain fell harder. Inside the small apartment, something new and fragile began to blossom, not just between Wesley and Marissa, but also within him. For years, Wesley had built his identity around professional success. Now, he discovered that his greatest achievement had nothing to do with business or money. It was being there, on a small, worn sofa, with a child asleep on his lap and Marissa's hand in his. It was belonging, finally, to something greater than himself. The small gestures had built invisible bridges between them. Fixing a faucet, paying overdue bills, bringing fresh fruit, reading stories to the girls. Each seemingly simple action was, in fact, a silent demonstration of commitment, of permanence. I didn't come to promise, I came to stay. As the rain fell outside, transforming the cold night into a symphony of soft sounds, Wesley knew, with a certainty he had never felt before, that he had found his way home. The sky dawned heavy that Friday, laden with grey clouds that promised rain. Marissa looked out the apartment window while preparing breakfast for the girls. "Looks like it's going to rain today," she commented, placing the plates on the table. "You'll need to take jackets to the diner." Janie made a face, spooning cereal into her mouth. "I don't like being stuck there when it rains, it's boring." "Can I bring my new coloring book?" Tessa asked, always more accepting of circumstances. "Of course, sweetie," Marissa replied, checking the clock. "Finish up soon. We need to leave in 15 minutes. The morning at the Blue Morning Cafe proceeded normally. Business was slow due to the threatening weather, which allowed Marissa to get ahead on some cleaning tasks. The girls were in their usual corner, Tessa focused on her coloring book and Janie restless, as always. Around noon, there was a small break in the clouds. The grey sky brightened a bit, though the sun hadn't appeared. "Mommy, can I go to the window to see the birds?" Janie asked, approaching the counter where Marissa was organizing cutlery. "You can, but stay where I can see you," she replied, distracted. Minutes later, while serving a customer, Marissa noticed out of the corner of her eye that Janie was no longer at the window. She quickly looked around and saw her talking to Tessa near the door. Before she could say anything, Rita approached with an urgent order from table 5, and Marissa turned her attention back to work. Time passed. Business picked up slightly with the arrival of a few lunch customers. Marissa was busy in the kitchen when Rita entered, frowning. "Marissa, where are the girls?" "Mr. Parker wants to know if they want to try the new chocolate cake." Marissa felt a shiver run down her spine. "Aren't they in their corner?" Rita shook her head. "No, I thought they were here with you." Immediately dropping what she was doing, Marissa ran to the main dining area. The girls' corner was empty, only Tessa's coloring book and some scattered pencils indicating they had been there. She checked the bathroom, the storage area, even Mr. Parker's small office. Nothing. "When was the last time you saw them?" she asked Rita, trying to control the growing panic in her voice. "About 40 minutes ago, maybe? Near the door?" The door. Marissa felt her blood run cold. She ran to the diner entrance and looked through the window. The sky had darkened again, menacingly. "They left," she murmured, more to herself than to Rita. Janie convinced Tessa to go out. Without thinking twice, Marissa pulled out her phone and dialed the number that in recent months had become her safe haven. Wesley was in the middle of a meeting with investors when he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Normally he would ignore it, but something made him discreetly check. Seeing Marissa's name on the screen, he excused himself and left the room. "Marissa, has something happened?" The voice on the other end was laden with fear. "The girls are gone, Wesley. They're not at the diner. I think they left without permission, and it's going to start raining hard any minute." "Where do you think they might have gone?" he asked, already walking quickly towards the elevator. "Probably the park. Janie has been complaining about being stuck inside the diner. There's a playground 2 blocks from here. They mentioned several times this week that they wanted to go there." "I'm on my way," Wesley said. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Start looking around the diner. Maybe they're just exploring the nearby shops." As he drove, Wesley felt an anxiety he had never experienced before. The sky grew darker by the minute, and thick drops began to pepper the car's windshield. "Please be okay," he repeated mentally like a mantra. Arriving at the Blue Morning Cafe, he found Marissa on the sidewalk, her eyes red with worry. "No sign of them in the shops nearby," she said, her voice trembling. "Well, the park is that way." At that moment, as if the heavens had simply waited for the worst possible moment, the rain began to fall heavily. Within seconds, they were drenched. "Let's split up," Wesley suggested. "You go down that street, I'll go around the block. Whoever finds them first calls the other." Marissa nodded and ran off, calling her daughters names. Wesley headed in the opposite direction, his heart pounding in his chest. The rain fell with increasing force, forming puddles on the sidewalks and reducing visibility. Upon arriving at the park, Wesley saw that it was practically deserted. The swings swayed empty in the wind. The wet seesaw reflected the grey light. He ran between the equipment, calling for the girls. "Janie, Tessa, where are you?" Only the sound of the rain replied. Wesley continued searching, each passing minute increasing his despair. He crossed the playground and headed towards a small wooded area. That's when he spotted, under an old oak tree, two small huddled figures. "Janie! Tessa!" he shouted, running towards the trees. The girls were sitting together under the oak, completely soaked. Janie had a protective arm around her sister, and both held their dolls against their chests, trying to shield them from the rain that seeped through the tree's leaves. Seeing Wesley, their faces lit up with relief. "Wesley!" Janie exclaimed, quickly standing up. Wesley knelt on the wet grass, checking them quickly. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" Both shook their heads negatively. Their hair was soaked, their dresses clung to their bodies, their lips slightly blue from the cold. "We knew you'd come," Tessa said, her voice trembling, her big green eyes fixed on him with an absolute trust that broke his heart. Those simple words hit Wesley with overwhelming force. At some point in the last few months, he had become the person these children fully trusted, the person they knew, for sure, would come for them when they were lost, scared, needing help. Without saying anything, Wesley picked them both up, one in each arm. They clung to him, their dolls squeezed between their small bodies and his chest. As he walked back to the playground, he spotted Marissa running towards him, her face a mix of relief and lingering fear. "I found them," he shouted to her. "They're okay." Marissa reached them breathless, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Without hesitation, she wrapped all three of them in a tight embrace, creating a small circle of human warmth under the torrential rain. "Don't ever do that again," she murmured, her voice choked. "You scared me so much." "Sorry, Mommy," Janie said, her usual boldness replaced by genuine regret. "It was my idea." "We just wanted to play a little," Tessa added. "We didn't see it was going to rain so much." Marissa tightened the hug, including Wesley completely in that family circle. For a long moment, they stood there, motionless in the rain, forming an inseparable unit, a silent, eternal moment. Wesley felt something solidify within him, as if the last pieces of a puzzle had finally fallen into place. There, drenched to the bone, with two trembling children in his arms and Marissa hugging them all, he finally understood what it meant to be part of a family. It wasn't about blood ties or official certificates. It was about being there, about being the person they knew would come, always. "We knew you'd come." The rain continued to fall around them, but in that small circle of hugs there was all the warmth in the world. The inevitable happened 2 days after the incident in the park. Wesley was in his office when he received a call from Marissa. "It's Janie," she said, her voice tense. "She woke up with a high fever. I had to miss work." "I'm on my way," he replied without hesitation, already closing his laptop and grabbing his jacket. His assistant raised her eyebrows as he rushed past, cancelling all his appointments for the day. "Family emergency," he briefly explained. It was only later in the car that Wesley realized what he had said. Family emergency. The words had come out naturally, without planning. At some point in the last few months, Marissa and the girls had become his family, without papers or ceremonies. Arriving at the apartment, he found Marissa in the kitchen preparing cold compresses, her face marked by worry. 39 degrees Celsius, she informed him, as Wesley hung up his coat. "And she complains of a sore throat." In the girls' small bedroom, Janie was curled up under a thin blanket, her face red with fever, her eyes bright and restless. Tessa sat beside her sister, watching her with evident concern. "Hello, Princess," Wesley said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I hear you're not feeling too well." Janie managed a weak smile. "My throat hurts," she complained, her voice hoarse. Wesley placed his hand on her forehead, feeling the heat of the fever. "We'll take care of it, okay?" Marissa came in with the compresses and a glass of water. Wesley stood up to make room for her, but Janie grabbed his hand. "Stay," the girl pleaded. Something in that simple request, in that complete trust, made Wesley feel a lump in his throat. He nodded, sitting down again. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. The day unfolded in a routine of care. Wesley went to the pharmacy to get the medicine prescribed by the doctor who had seen them over the phone. Then he helped Marissa prepare a light vegetable soup. While she bathed Janie to try and bring down the fever, he entertained Tessa with stories and quiet games. In the evening, when Janie's fever finally subsided a little, Marissa looked exhausted. "You need to rest," Wesley said. "You have an early shift tomorrow, don't you?" She nodded, rubbing her tired eyes. "Mr. Parker can't let me off 2 days in a row. We're short-staffed. I'll stay with them tomorrow," Wesley offered. "I can work remotely from here." "I can't ask that of you, Wesley. You have a company to run." "The company will survive a day without my physical presence," he replied with a smile. "Besides, I'm not asking permission, I'm informing you that I'll be staying here tomorrow." The relief in Marissa's eyes was visible, even as she tried to protest once more. Finally, she accepted the offer with a silent "thank you." The next morning, Marissa left for work after checking on Janie, who still had a fever, though lower. Wesley transformed the small living room table into a makeshift office, with his laptop and phone, from where he could monitor the girls in their bedroom. Around noon, the bedroom door opened and Tessa appeared, her face pale and eyes bright. "Wesley," she called in a weak voice, "God, I'm not feeling well." He immediately dropped the phone in the middle of an important conference call and rushed to her. Her forehead was hot, almost as hot as Janie's had been the day before. "Oh, Tessa," he murmured, picking her up. "You too?" The girl just nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Wesley carried her to the bedroom, placing her on the bed beside her sister, who was restlessly sleeping. "I'll make you some tea," he promised, stroking her hair. "And we need to check your temperature." The next few days blurred into a routine of thermometers, medicine, cold compresses, and soups. The flu hit both girls hard, probably a result of exposure to the rain and cold. Wesley completely rearranged his schedule, spending most of his time at the apartment, alternating with Marissa in caring for them. When she was at work, he took care of the girls. When she returned, he quickly went to the office to handle urgent matters, or worked from the kitchen table while Marissa bathed the girls or prepared meals. It was a silent and efficient partnership, born out of necessity, strengthened by affection. There was no discussion about roles or responsibilities, just two adults caring for two children they loved, finding a rhythm together without needing words. Wesley discovered abilities he didn't know he possessed. He learned to make a chicken soup that Janie could swallow even with her sore throat. He developed a technique for giving medicine to Tessa, who hated the taste of syrup. He found that his deep voice, reading stories in a low, steady tone, calmed both of them when the fever made them agitated. On the third night, with the girls still sick but slowly improving, Marissa entered their room after a long shift at the diner. She was exhausted, with deep circles under her eyes and her body aching from being on her feet all day. She stopped at the doorway, silent, taking in the scene before her. Wesley was sitting in the small armchair between the two beds, a storybook open on his lap. Janie and Tessa had climbed out of their beds at some point and were now huddled against him, one on each side, sleeping soundly. Janie's head rested on his right shoulder, while Tessa was nestled under his left arm. Wesley himself had fallen asleep, his head slightly tilted, still holding the book. Marissa felt something break and rebuild within her simultaneously. A protective barrier she had maintained for years crumbled, while something new, stronger, and more terrifying took shape. For so long it had just been her and the girls against the world. Now there was someone else in that intimate circle, someone who didn't need to be there, but chose to be. Someone who held her sleeping daughters with the same reverence she herself held them. The fear of loss, that old acquaintance that had accompanied her since she was abandoned while pregnant, returned with full force. Because now it wasn't just Janie and Tessa who could be hurt if Wesley decided to leave. It was her too. All of them had let down their guard, let him in, making themselves vulnerable to his presence and his potential absence. Marissa took a deep breath, trying to push the thought away. She approached silently and touched Wesley's shoulder, who woke with a start. "Sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to scare you." Wesley blinked several times, orienting himself, then smiled when he saw Marissa. "I think we fell asleep during chapter 3, he explained, indicating the book with a gentle nod of his head, trying not to disturb the girls. "Let me help you," Marissa offered, carefully picking up Tessa. The girl mumbled something unintelligible, but didn't wake as her mother placed her back in her bed. Wesley did the same with Janie, tucking her under the covers. Both stood for a moment observing the sleeping children, their breaths now more regular, their faces less feverish than in previous days. "I think the worst is over," Wesley commented in a low voice when they left the room. "Thanks to you," Marissa replied, heading to the kitchen. "I don't know how I would have managed all this alone." "You would have found a way," he said, following her. "You always have." Marissa began preparing tea, her movements automatic, almost mechanical. She was so exhausted. "Yes, but at what cost?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. "I probably would have lost my job for missing so many days." Wesley approached, gently taking the kettle from her hands. "Go rest," he said. "I'll make the tea." She didn't protest, a sign of her extreme exhaustion. She sat at the table, watching him move around the small kitchen with a familiarity that still surprised her, as if he had always been there, part of that space, that routine, that life. "The girls adore you," she commented, when Wesley placed a steaming mug in front of her. "The feeling is mutual," he replied, sitting across from her. "I'm scared," Marissa confessed after a long silence, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm scared of how much this will hurt them when—" She didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. The "when you leave" was implicit, hanging in the air between them. Wesley studied her for a moment, his face serious. "Marissa, I'm not going anywhere." She gave a sad smile, her eyes fixed on the tea mug. "People always leave, Wesley. That's what I've learned." "Look at me," he pleaded, reaching his hand across the table to touch hers. "Please." Reluctantly, Marissa raised her eyes, meeting his. "And in the last few months, I've discovered more about myself, about what truly matters, than in all the previous years," Wesley said, his voice firm but gentle. "I have a life many would consider enviable. Professional success, financial comfort, recognition. But do you know when I feel truly alive? When I'm here, in this small apartment, with you and the girls." Marissa felt her heart race, but she couldn't answer. "I spent years building a career, accumulating things," he continued. "But I never built a home, not until I met you." A silent tear streamed down Marissa's face, which she made no move to wipe away. The following days brought gradual improvement for the girls. The fever disappeared completely, the cough lessened, and slowly they regained their usual energy. On the 6th day after the flu began, Wesley arrived at the apartment and was greeted by Janie running to him, with no trace of the sick, listless child from previous days. "Wesley," she cried, hugging his legs. "We can go out and play now, Mommy said so." Tessa approached more calmly, but her smile was as radiant as her sister's. "We're cured," she announced solemnly. Wesley knelt down, hugging both of them. "I see my little nurses don't need my medical care anymore," he joked. "The soup you made was magical," Janie declared. "It was the medicine," Tessa corrected, always practical. "But the soup helped." Marissa watched the scene from the kitchen, smiling. She also looked more rested, the dark circles under her eyes less pronounced, a healthy color returning to her face. After the girls went to their room to play with their dolls, Wesley approached Marissa, who was finishing preparing dinner. "Can we talk after they're asleep?" he asked. "There's something important I want to tell you." Marissa nodded, a shadow of apprehension quickly passing through her eyes. Dinner was lively, with the girls talking non-stop, making up for days of illness-induced quiet. After helping with the dishes, Wesley participated in the nighttime routine, listening to the girls' prayers, reading a final story, turning off the light, and wishing them sweet dreams. When they were finally alone in the small living room, Wesley gestured to the sofa. "Shall we sit down?" Marissa obeyed, a visible tension in her shoulders, as if preparing for bad news. These past few days taking care of the girls made me realize something, Wesley began, his voice calm but resolute. Something I think I always knew, ever since that first time Janie asked me where she could buy a dad. He paused, searching for the right words. I never forgot you, Marissa. All these years, even when I thought I had moved on, there was something unfinished. I was immature when I left, focused only on my career, on my dreams. He took a deep breath, looking directly into her eyes. But today, if you're willing, I want to be their father, not by blood, by heart. Marissa's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't answer, his words echoing in her mind, in her heart. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they were made for it. You already are, she replied, her voice choked with emotion. You just needed to say it. In that small room, under the soft lamplight, something solidified between them. It wasn't just the beginning of a rekindled romance, nor just the formation of a new family. It was the recognition that, sometimes, the longest and most winding paths lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Spring arrived in full force that April Saturday. The small chapel garden was covered in wildflowers that seemed to have bloomed especially for the occasion. It was a perfectly sunny day, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of nearby magnolias. The chapel, a modest stone building with colorful stained glass windows, had been chosen for its size, small enough to feel full with a few guests, and for its discreet location away from the city center. Inside the small room adjacent to the chapel, Marissa observed her reflection in the mirror, while Rita, now a friend and not just a co-worker, adjusted the flower arrangement in her hair. Done, Rita said, stepping back to admire her work. Simple and perfect. Exactly as you wanted, Marissa smiled, almost not recognizing the woman in the mirror. It wasn't a nervous or insecure smile, but a peaceful and full one. She had chosen a simple ivory satin dress, without a train or elaborate veil, just an elegant cut that flattered her silhouette. In her hair, intertwined white flowers formed a delicate crown. Are the girls ready? She asked, adjusting a strand of hair. Mr. Parker is giving them the final touches. They're so excited they can barely stand still to fix their bows. The door opened, and Mr. Parker, the owner of the diner, who was now practically a family member, poked his head in. The princesses are ready, Marissa, and I must say they look absolutely adorable. Janie and Tessa came running in, their identical light blue dresses twirling around them like small clouds. Each carried a small basket with rose petals, and their hair was styled in perfect curls, adorned with flowers that matched those in Marissa's hair. Mommy, you're beautiful, Tessa exclaimed, her eyes wide. You look like a princess, Janie agreed, skipping around her mother. Wesley's going to be speechless. Marissa knelt down to be at her daughter's height, taking care not to wrinkle her dress. And you two are absolutely stunning, she said, adjusting a loose bow in Janie's hair. The most beautiful flower girls there ever were. Are you nervous, Mommy? Tessa asked, always attentive to adult emotions. Marissa reflected for a moment. No, she replied sincerely. I'm not nervous. I'm happy. Very happy. It was true. The path to this point hadn't been linear or easy. There had been moments of doubt, difficult conversations, necessary adjustments. Wesley had temporarily moved into their apartment while they looked for a larger house. There was the question of what the girls would call him, a natural transition from Wesley to Daddy that happened without pressure or formality. There were the bureaucracies of the adoption process, which was still ongoing, so he could legally become their father. But every obstacle faced had only strengthened the certainty that they were on the right path. This wasn't an impulsive or romantic decision. It was a solid commitment, built day by day through small gestures, shared care, and a love that grew in the everyday moments. A gentle knock on the door announced it was time. Mr. Parker looked at his watch. The guests are all seated. Wesley is already at the altar, looking simultaneously the happiest and most nervous man in the world, he informed with a smile. Are you ready, ladies? Marissa took a deep breath, looking at her daughters and then at her own reflection one last time. We're ready. Inside the chapel, about 30 people, close friends, some colleagues of both Wesley and Marissa, and neighbors who had become important to the family, waited on pews decorated with simple wildflower arrangements. Wesley stood near the altar, impeccable in his navy blue suit, chatting quietly with Thomas, his personal assistant and now friend, who would be his best man. Hearing the first chords of the soft music played by the pianist in the corner of the chapel, he immediately turned to the entrance. The doors opened, and Janie and Tessa entered first, walking side by side with carefully rehearsed steps, scattering rose petals along the aisle. Their faces were pure joy, and occasionally Janie waved animatedly to the guests, making everyone smile. When the girls reached the altar, they positioned themselves on the opposite side of Thomas, as they had practiced. Then, everyone turned to the entrance, where Marissa appeared, radiant. She had chosen to walk down the aisle alone, a symbol of the strength and independence she had cultivated over the years as a single mother. But this time, that independence wasn't a defensive armor. It was the solid foundation upon which she chose to share her life with someone. Wesley felt his breath catch when he saw her. It wasn't just Marissa's physical beauty that touched him, but everything she represented: strength, courage, unconditional love. The woman who had raised two wonderful daughters alone, facing every obstacle with dignity, was now walking towards him, choosing him as a partner on this journey. When Marissa reached the altar, Wesley extended his hand to her, his eyes moist with suppressed emotion. "You look stunning," he whispered. "You do too," she replied, smiling. The officiant, a justice of the peace who was a longtime friend of Wesley's, began the ceremony with simple words about unity, commitment, and family. He spoke about how true love doesn't always follow direct paths, sometimes needing detours and years of separation before finding its destination. When it came time for the vows, Wesley spoke first. He had written and rewritten his words dozens of times, but looking at Marissa and the girls beside her, all the carefully crafted phrases seemed inadequate. "Marissa," he began, holding her hands, "10 years ago, when we parted, I thought I was following my destiny. I built a career, achieved material success, lived what many would consider a full life. But there was an emptiness that nothing filled." He paused, gathering his words. Then, by a coincidence that seems like fate, 2 little girls walked into my building lobby and asked a question that would change my life forever. He looked at Janie and Tessa, who watched him with radiant smiles. "Through them, I found you again, and I discovered that the emptiness I felt was exactly the size and shape of you 3. His voice faltered slightly. "I promise to love you, Marissa, with all my heart. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your support. I promise to wake up every day trying to deserve the trust you place in me. And I promise to love Janie and Tessa as my daughters, to protect them, guide them, and support them in all the paths they choose." Marissa took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. When she began to speak, her voice was soft but firm. "Wesley, for years I built walls around myself and around the girls. I learned to depend only on myself, not to trust, not to expect. It was safer that way." She smiled slightly. "Then you appeared, not tearing down those walls by force, but simply being present, day after day, until the walls no longer made sense." She squeezed his hands in hers. "You entered our lives without demands, only offering support, respect, and love. I promise to return that love every day. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your safe harbor. I promise to remember, even on difficult days, how lucky we are to have found each other again." The officiant was about to proceed with the exchange of rings when Janie, unable to contain her emotion, stepped forward and shouted, "Now we have a real dad." A murmur of emotional laughter rippled through the chapel. Marissa looked at her daughter, torn between surprise and maternal embarrassment. But before she could say anything, Wesley knelt down, coming to Janie and Tessa's height. "And I gained what I never knew I needed," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. He opened his arms and the girls ran to him, hugging him tightly. For a moment, the formal ceremony was forgotten as the 3 shared that embrace. Then Marissa joined them, completing the family circle. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. The officiant waited patiently for them to resume their positions, before continuing with the exchange of rings and finally declaring Wesley and Marissa husband and wife. The kiss that sealed the union was soft and deep, laden with promises and certainties. When they separated, the girls applauded animatedly along with the guests. The small reception took place in the garden adjacent to the chapel, where round tables had been set under the flowering trees. It was a simple and elegant celebration, exactly as they had planned. Mr. Parker had insisted on personally preparing the cake and some special appetizers, while the rest of the menu had been carefully selected to please both adult guests and the children present. Wesley and Marissa circulated among the guests, receiving congratulations and sharing moments with each person who had been part of their journey. The girls ran through the garden with other children, their blue dresses visible among the flowers like small, constantly moving butterflies. "Happy?" Wesley asked, finding a calm moment beside Marissa. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied, leaning in for a brief kiss. 2 weeks later, on an exceptionally sunny Sunday, Wesley parked the car near the city's large park. The new house they had bought was just 10 minutes away, a spacious house with a small garden, where each girl had her own room, and there was even an office for Wesley to work remotely whenever he wanted. "Did everyone get everything?" Marissa asked, opening the trunk. Janie was already bouncing with excitement, holding her favorite doll. "I brought Annie, she wants to picnic too." Tessa helped her mom take out the basket and blanket. "I brought a book, in case we want to read stories," she informed seriously. Wesley picked up the large picnic basket with one hand and extended the other to hold Janie's hand. "Shall we find a good spot under that big tree?" he suggested, pointing to a majestic oak in the center of the park. They walked together across the soft green grass, Marissa carrying the blanket and holding Tessa's hand. When they reached the oak, they spread the large checkered blanket and began to arrange the lunch. Marissa had prepared various types of sandwiches, freshly cut fruits, homemade cookies, and a thermos with iced tea. Wesley had added some surprises, small cupcakes decorated with each of their initials, and heart-shaped chocolates that he knew the girls loved. After they ate, Wesley leaned back against the tree trunk, with Marissa resting on his shoulder. The girls played a few feet away, building a small house for their dolls with fallen branches and leaves. "We were right to choose that house," Marissa commented, watching her daughters. "It's so close to here. We can come every weekend." Wesley agreed, kissing the top of her head. "Ever since I met them, I knew they needed space to run and play." Janie, noticing the adults were talking about them, abandoned the little house construction and came running to the picnic blanket. "This is the best day ever," she declared, throwing herself onto the blanket beside them. "We have a new house and a park nearby and—" She interrupted herself, looking at Wesley with her big green eyes. Then, as if she had just had an epiphany, she jumped up and began spinning in circles, her arms wide open. "We didn't buy a dad. We got one," she shouted to the sky, her voice full of pure joy. "The best dad in the world." Tessa, who had approached more calmly, sat beside Wesley. "It's true," she confirmed with her usual seriousness. "You're better than a bought dad." Wesley felt a lump in his throat. Marissa squeezed his hand, her eyes meeting his in a look of calm, secure love. In that look was a silent conversation, a mutual understanding of everything they had overcome to get there. Janie continued running and skipping through the grass, her inexhaustible energy fueled by happiness. Tessa soon joined her sister, the two chasing a passing butterfly. The dolls lay scattered on the grass, temporarily forgotten in the excitement of play. Theirs amidst laughter, trees and dolls scattered on the grass, Wesley and Marissa watched their daughters, their fingers intertwined in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. They knew, without needing to say it aloud, that they hadn't rebuilt the past, that young love interrupted so many years ago. They had created something even better, a family made of conscious choices and mature love, a family that hadn't come about by chance or obligation, but by daily decisions to stay, to care, to love. "Thank you," Wesley whispered. "For what?" Marissa asked, turning to look at him. "Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this," he replied, gesturing to the girls, the picnic, the perfect moment they were experiencing. "For letting me be their dad." Marissa smiled, resting her head on his shoulder again. "They chose you," she simply said. "From the very first day." The afternoon sun bathed the park in golden hues. In the distance, Janie and Tessa's joyful voices mingled with those of other children. Soon they would have to pack everything up and go home for dinner and baths and bedtime stories, for the routine they had built together, made of simple and precious moments. But for now, Wesley and Marissa remained there, witnessing the everyday miracle they had created, a family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.